Welcome to Badass Ladyfolk. I'm your host, Christine Stoddard, and today's guest is Sally Jane Brown. Welcome, Sally.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, of course. And you have your beautiful work in the studio. I see some of it in the background.
Yes, thank
So,
you.
how did you get into studio art?
Well, I was originally a fashion design major in undergrad, back 20 years ago. And my first semester, we had to take a drawing class, and I just totally fell in love with raw charcoal to paper, the simplest form. And so from then on, I was an art major, and I didn't look back, although I did after after graduating from undergrad. I kind of quit making art for a couple years, and then I came back to it when I had kids. So yeah, I was just I was always creative, making plays as a kid and writing and everything like that. I just didn't really have the confidence in my artistic ability until undergrad, when my professor was just really encouraging.
What do you think specifically about that professor and that environment encouraged you? Were there certain activities or ways that you were given feedback?
Yeah, it was more about the expression and uh less about supposedly being representational or realistic or whatever. That's what you think as a kid, everything has to look like a photograph or whatever. So it was much more about the experience and the practice, than anything else. And I was just like, oh, I don't have to be perfect, whatever that means. So that's what really made me fall in love with it, for sure.
And how did your fashion design background inform your studio practice? Or did they feel separate?
I mean, I guess in a way, I'm still doing figurative work. That's like the main focus is figurative, which is fashion is for people. So I guess in that way, it's definitely relational. And then a lot of my work is really playful. Like back when I would do fashion designs, my designs were very playful. So I guess in that way, and it's a lot of my work is dedicated to women artists, and fashion is pretty heavily dominated by women, although there's a lot of men too. So yeah, I guess in those ways they kind of still relate. I apologize, I'm petting my cat over here so
No,
she
don't
doesn't whine.
apologize. I
That's why my
once had a
hand is up.
dog in the studio. Like the guest actually brought her dog.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, no, it was very unexpected and wonderful.
Oh, good.
So, yes, when I think of you, I definitely and your work, I definitely think of women, women's empowerment, feminism. How strongly do you cling to some of these labels? What labels do you accept? And do you find them limiting in any way? Or do you even think that idea is BS? And why would someone argue against using those kinds of labels?
Yeah, I'm all about them. I don't think they're limiting at all. I think that when people think that, I think that's their limitation. They're placing the limitation on it. I think like Judy Chicago, we should claim it, because we need to. We're out there. Our perspectives are still not being shared as much as men and other underrepresented artists. So I think the more claiming, the better.
Yeah. You said that you started to go back to your own art once you became a mother. Why do you think that is?
I just had this sort of like itch when my oldest was born, that I just had to start creating again. And I was just like, it's not gonna sell, I'm not gonna have a show, whatever. I'm just home with my baby. I'm just gonna draw. So I started drawing her, just laying there on the blanket. And then as a mother, you kind of like lose sense, well, not you but me, okay. I lost sense of my body, because I'm breastfeeding, I'm doing everything for this baby like all the time. And so I kind of wanted to get back into my body and feel like, who am I, who am I again? So I went back to art school as a figure model. So I kind of went in like backwards, and it kind of helped me gain confidence, like with my body, seeing all these different perspectives, not good or bad, just, drawing the figure. And the professor, Wanda Ewing, was a huge impact on my work, and she got me back into creating. And encouraged me to look at women artists. And this is when I realized that women artists, I know I was way late, but I realized in my mid-20s that women artists were under and misrepresented throughout history. So that's maybe because I was so blindsided is maybe why I've been so passionate about it ever since. And so yeah, that's what got me back into creating work, is trying to find my voice and my body and myself after I had my babies.
Yeah, I don't think that you were late in realizing that. I think in talking with many women, it seems like many of us don't really come to understand and articulate a lot of the inequality that we've seen and felt our entire lives until we're in college or even after.
Yeah, I mean, I
So,
was an art history minor in undergrad, and I didn't realize anything. None of my professors pointed anything out. I was just like, oh, well, it was just mostly men. Like I didn't know. Like,
yeah.
so yeah, it's really sad, but but yeah, hopefully it's changing for the better, I think. Yeah.
What did you find empowering about figure modeling, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was getting back into my body. I felt like it wasn't my own. And so kind of just seeing people, like I said, I mean, it's kind of objectifying, but it's also not, because the artists aren't thinking about me as good or bad. They're just, they're trying to depict me and express me in their own different way. And so walking around the classroom and like seeing these different depictions was just like interesting and kind of got me back into my body, but also out of my body. And
Mhm.
so it was just a really fun, yeah, I felt like an empowering experience to me, in kind of a strange way. But then because I still wasn't really confident in my artwork. So it was also kind of like that back into education, even though I wasn't a student, I was, back in there and like listening and seeing and, oh yeah, I love this.
And speaking of education, you're super educated. You have 2 masters? Is that what it is?
I do, yeah. So after undergrad and when I quit making work, I decided I was gonna go into museums, like doing nonprofit fundraising. And so that's what I did for a couple years, and I got my master's in public administration. Then I got burnt out, and I was super privileged and fortunate to be able to quit working when I was married and had my kids. And so I went back, like I said, I was figure modeling, and then I got a gig at the local paper doing arts reviews. And so that I just got like super back into the arts and passionate about it. Then when I moved, I was in Omaha then. When I moved out here to the east, I was just looking for jobs and there wasn't many opportunities. My kids were back in school. And so I went back to get my master's in art history. I was trying to decide between art history or studio art. And I just was so eager for more information on women
Mhm.
artists and everything like that. So I went into art history, but still practicing art throughout. Yeah, for sure.
What sort of inequities did you notice working in museums in admin?
Yeah, well, it was mostly women. It was all
Hmm.
women as, the workers, and then the directors were mostly men at that time. Although then I went to a nonprofit that was not an art museum, and the director was a woman. That was a more social services organization. So yeah, that's mostly how it was. The board of directors, I mean, this is the early 2000s, but the board of directors was mostly men. And I wonder what that, I think it's still, I would guess that it's still mostly women are sort of like the middle management, and the men are still majority directors. That would be my guess. But yeah, I mean, as far as exhibitions, I learned a ton when I was doing arts reviews, because I just noticed by doing these, I would get assigned to do these reviews, and like most of the galleries were doing exhibitions by men. I'm like, what is going on? Um, so that's when I started La Femme Folle, which I know I featured you on my old blog about women artists, and I started curating exhibitions just independently of women artists. So yeah, I don't remember your question now.
No, no, I was just curious. I mean, you answered it. I was curious about the inequity you noticed while
Oh,
working
right.
in
Yeah,
museums.
yeah.
And I'm also curious about how studying art history as a minor in undergrad was different than studying it in a master's program.
Yeah, so in undergrad as a minor, it was a lot of memorization.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like I remember just making flashcards and remembering dates and names and titles and everything like that. I didn't really, I mean, I know I was taught about the movements and everything like that, but it didn't really click for the most part. But graduate school was way more deep dive into, theory and periods and specific, I would have a whole class. I mean, I had a whole class on women in art, thankfully. But yeah, so we would have individual classes on different movements and periods. So it was way more deep dive than doing it as a minor in undergrad for sure.
Yeah, that's been my experience with graduate school is everything is just way more rigorous.
Yes, yes,
And
totally.
you really start to see how much you didn't know.
Yes, I mean, I wanted to quit so many times. I'm so glad I didn't, but I don't know about you,
Oh,
but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, very relatable. What
Yes.
advice do you have for women who may be mothers, may be working, and want to go to grad school, especially for something that some people might see as impractical, like art
Oh,
or
yeah,
art
I know.
history?
I just saw something about how poorly we're being paid. Like,
Fun!
I know, I'm like, "Thanks for telling me what I already know." I mean, if you're passionate about it, then do it. Just, I mean, I think we need more women in all industries. So I think if
Yeah.
you're a woman or a mother and just you can do it slowly. My first master's program, I did one class at a time for 3 or 4 years. And so, if you need to do that, do that. And then my second master's, I was a teacher's assistant, so I did it full time. And it's a blast. It's a crazy ride, especially as a mom. I remember being in McDonald's with the play gym and studying while they were playing. But just baby steps. Think of it. I try to think of, I still do this, like just little things instead of, the big picture. That's what helped when I was frustrated for sure.
Yeah, now my eyes are really drawn to the piece of work behind you,
Oh, that's
and
a work in
I wanna
progress.
hear about it.
Well, this is a work in progress that I started last year
Mm.
before my residency in Argentina. And those are the
Oh,
Argentina colors. They're also the Swedish colors and the Ukrainian
mhm.
colors. And so there's writing on it from a Ukrainian feminist philosopher about
Mm.
the importance of women uh, honoring domesticity and honoring women's work in the home. But it's also kind of like a feminist bent to it. So yeah, that's what that is. I'm not done with it yet, but yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, when I think of your work, from what I've seen at least, I definitely think of the feminine figure, like you were mentioning earlier, and the ways that you bring your own body into your work. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, about 2011 or something, I was in Washington, D.C. at the Hirshhorn, and I saw an exhibition of Eve Klein's anthropometries. And they're these prints that he did in performance in the 60s. He was in a suit and he had half a dozen or so nude women come out and paint themselves with blue paint and then print themselves on the canvas. And I loved it. I thought it was like so cool, but I didn't love how he was like the director and he got all the credit and their names weren't on there and everything like that. So I was like, I'm gonna do this, but I'm gonna be the director and the model and the artist. And so I just like I fell in love with like the abstract, like how it abstracts the body, how it both like objectifies and subjectifies the body. Like you don't really know like what I look like by looking at that. You might not even know it's a body. So I
Mhm.
love that. I love the expressiveness and the playfulness, and it's really fun to do body prints. Um, so yeah, I use that as a big mode for couple of my series of works, especially again as I was getting back into my body and trying to find out, who I was again after having my babies, 2 of them, they're now teenagers. So yeah, it kind of helped with that as well. It's kind of a lot of art and writing is therapeutic, so for sure, it's definitely a method of that for me.
Yeah. Do you think that reviewing others' work, curating others' work has changed your work or informed your work in some way?
Yes, for sure. Other art totally impacts me directly and indirectly. I always want to see more
Yeah.
and think about it. And reviewing work, I don't know about you, but doing interviews, like it slows me down. Like I can go to a museum and enjoy a show, but if I'm reviewing the show, I'm really gonna like take time and slow down and pay attention and think about things. And so that really helps me and inspires me in my own work, thinking about the process and the technique and the intent. So yes, for sure.
Hmm.
What about you? So I know you also write and interview and stuff like that. Does that
Yeah. I definitely think that talking to people can give me new ideas and new
exactly?
insights
Yes.
and often more grace and empathy for myself.
Oh, good point. Good point. I like that. Yes.
Yeah, just being able to relate to other people's experiences and hear, "Oh, yeah, I've struggled with that too," is
Yes.
really validating.
True. Speaking of, Judy Chicago, I read her autobiography, her first one, in grad school, and it was the most impactful book, one of the most impactful I've ever read because things that she was going through in the 70s were the same things that I was going through in the
Yeah.
2000s. And I was just like, what? It's just that's why we need to keep talking, keep creating, keep writing. So, it's not lost.
Yeah, I haven't read the book, but
It's really good.
now I need to.
Yes, it's very good.
So, when did you start curating exactly? Was it with the blog or was
Yes.
it
It
okay.
was actually before the blog. So I invited Wanda Ewing, the artist I mentioned before, who I was modeling for, because like I said, she was super inspiring. She kind of took me on as a mentor or a mentee. And so I invited her to curate a show because like I said before, I was like, where are the women artists show? Like, I don't get it. So I was just like, hey, Wanda, if I got a venue and I did the promotion and I did, you know, whatever management stuff, would you curate a group show of women artists around the body? And she's like, yeah. So she created this show. She called it La Femme Full, and it was a total hit. And it was amazing. And I was just like, hey, what if I know I was writing for the paper, but the paper was mostly, again, male dominated. So I'm like, what if I just start a blog and start writing and interviewing women artists? And, it's just a random platform, but it's just another platform. So I did that. And so that's kind of how it began. And I ran it for 10 years and I did more exhibitions under the same name. And I did other events like music events and artist talks and everything like that. And yeah, I ended up interviewing over 1,000 women across the world. It was really
Wow.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah. It was really fun.
A
So
1,000.
yeah, I mean, I was hardcore for a while. I had one a day for a couple of years. Yeah.
Wow. It was a lot. I didn't realize it was that many.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun. And you were one of them.
Yeah, thank you. You
Yeah.
one of the many things that fascinates me about your work is how you make it very visible that one can make art, show art, and have community outside of New York City because there is such this mystique around this place that I love, but also it's a tough place to live. So, can you talk about your relationship with the New York City art scene and if you feel you even have one?
That's a really good question. I mean, I know I go there about once a year. My cousin runs the Brooklyn Bowl, so I get to go see
Oh,
him and go
what?
to yeah, and go to the art museums. Of course, Judy Chicago's the dinner party, super
Yeah.
impactful. I love to go to all the big institutions, so I'm kind of like that. But I love like Chelsea, walking around there, and then the AIR gallery that's in Brooklyn, right,
Yeah.
for women artists. Some contacts like you and some, gallerists and some other artists that live up there. My friend Amy Chaiklin, she lives up there. And so I've done some studio visits, but I don't feel I maybe had a handful of works and shows in New York. But yeah, I definitely feel like an outsider in terms of being an artist. Like definitely welcome as far as like a tourist visiting, but I don't have any clue how I would even have, a solo exhibit besides applying for these blindly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But you have made work and shown work in Pittsburgh and
Mhm.
Omaha, right? And
Yeah.
somewhere
Mhm.
else, West Virginia.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
Morgantown, West Virginia, and, in random shows across the nation, for sure. But yeah, solo shows here, Omaha, Pittsburgh, and some other like random like Ohio, Nashville. Yeah. Yeah.
How would you describe the art scenes in each of the places you've lived?
Well, I lived in Oregon for a little bit, but not
Hmm.
enough to get to know, see on the coast of Oregon. And then Omaha, majority of my life. And the art scene there is honestly amazing. Like there's so, and I had no idea, okay? I did not realize what I had, but they're so supportive. Like every time I had a La Femme Full exhibition, it was packed. And, we had arts coverage in the paper. We had, I mean, they still do. It's just not, I'm not there anymore. Tons of galleries support different art walks for different neighborhoods. A couple major art institutions, Bemis Arts Center, that's a residency, and the Kaneko
Yeah.
Art Museum. And it was just awesome. And I had no idea. I thought, oh, it's like that everywhere. But no, when I came here and I have a few, good arts friends and people that are good, but when I came here, whatever, 10 years ago, and I went around to the few less than a handful of nonprofit arts organizations, pretty much turned away for being a volunteer.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's really, in my experience, and I'm not trying to be negative because, maybe things will change and et cetera, but it's pretty disjointed. It's pretty like old
Mhm.
guard. But I'm not West Virginia, and people from here are very proud and they don't like to talk negatively of the place. But it's very different. Like if when I have art shows, like, maybe people will show up, maybe they won't, maybe some random people will come in, but it's not like the whole, like it's the event. It's so yeah, it's very, very different here in that trip. But Pittsburgh is awesome.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's more like Omaha, where they have like different pockets, and obviously the Carnegie and the Mattress Factory and Andy Warhol, and so I'm really fortunate to be close to Pittsburgh for sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
How do you feel about being in New York and being an artist? Do you feel like it's accessible?
Well, yes and no. It is extremely expensive, but I come from an expensive place. I
Mhm.
grew up in the suburbs of Washington D.C.
Oh, okay.
So the cost of living is very similar. It's only about a 10% difference, and for some costs of living, it's the same.
Yeah.
Like in New York, there are rent stabilized apartments, so you can, if you're lucky, find apartments that are like $800 a month. But in DC, there's not really anything like that. There also aren't super tiny rat hole apartments the way you find in New York.
Yeah.
So it's like in DC, no matter what, you're probably going to be starting at a rent of 2,000 a
Wow.
month. Even if you get more square footage than you would in New York, it's still quite the barrier to entry. It's an expensive place to live.
Yeah.
Um, in New York, what I really love is that you have every kind of art and every kind of art scene. And that's very different than DC, which is a lot more conservative, a lot more traditional. And they have excellent funding for the arts in DC when it comes to dead artists for the most part,
Oh,
or
interesting.
artists who are affiliated with the embassy, so coming to visit from another country.
Yeah,
But for the most part, the arts in DC are uh, dead painters, Shakespeare plays, stuff at the
interesting.
Kennedy Center, which again tends to be work by non-living artists. It's not really a place that has a good homegrown scene. You
Yeah,
don't have a lot of working artists there who are showing or getting their work produced. It's just not that sort of environment. It doesn't mean there aren't
interesting.
artists. Of
Yeah,
course there are artists. And I definitely found places there where I felt I belonged and could share my work and experience other people's work, people who are actually living.
yeah,
um
that's interesting.
Whereas New York, yeah, you just meet so many different kinds of artists, and there is a lot of support here. One of the organizations I love is run by the city, and it's Materials for the Arts. Um,
Cool.
it's a giant warehouse, and you make appointments and go there and grab what you want for free. You just have to be
Awesome.
affiliated with a New York City nonprofit that's on their approved list.
So cool.
But yeah, that place I found out about in the first month that I lived here because of some Craigslist ad I answered, and I will forever be grateful for Craigslist because of that.
That is awesome. How cool. And you had a solo exhibition recently, so you make it happen too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's how I see it, and for me, there's just not really another place I picture myself living. My dad and his family are from here, so I do have that connection. Even though I didn't come here until I was an adult, I still would visit a lot as a
yeah.
kid and a teenager. And this was just always the place that I wanted to live. Is there anything you want to talk about in the brief time that we have left that I should ask you about?
I am doing a blog series about my next series of work um on the blank I call the blank canvas blog series. And so I'm documenting the process of this new series that I'm doing.
Okay, tell me about your new blank canvas blog series.
Yeah, thank you. So, I was gifted this huge roll of canvas a couple years ago by a very generous patron of mine, and it sat here for a year and a half, and it sat in my corner, and I was doing other work, but it just kind of like stared at me, like, when are you gonna use me? And so, I decided in order to kind of make me use it, to start a blog series about the process of what I was going to do with it. So I started out like talking about my process and my research and document like honoring women artists is so important to me. Then I documented the first marks, and so that's where I'm at. I have the about to do the next week. So it's been fun, and it's on my website, sallyjanebrown.com. And so, yeah, thank you. It's fun, and I'm gonna hopefully finish them by the end of the year. That's my goal.
So, what are you looking forward to for whatever period of time you wanted? I was about to say the rest of the year, and then I thought, oh, well, maybe that blog series. But just in general, what are you looking forward to as an artist, as a creator?
Well, I have a book coming out this fall, and I illustrated it, and it's poetry by my friend Renee Nicholson, and it's about West Virginia monsters. So it's like something that
Ooh.
I've never done before. Like, but it's really fun and playful, and she kind of puts these monsters in a contemporary world. And so I illustrated it. It's really fun. So I'm pretty excited about that to come out.
Yeah. When
Halloween.
is it coming out? How can we find it?
October 4th, it'll launch, and SallyJaneBrown.com. It'll be on my website.
Yeah, great. Well, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Yeah, thank you.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sally. That is all the time that we have. Dear viewers or listeners, if you are listening to our podcast version, thank you so much for joining us. As always, I am your host, Christine Stoddard, and this is Badass Lady Folk. Tune in next time.
Thanks.